these are all the lines for the assessment, which is tomorrow, the 21st. There was a grove in the middle of the city, most pleasant in shade, where first the Phoenicians, having been tossed on the waves and by a whirlwind, dug up a sign in the place, right? In which place had dug up the sign, which royal Juno had shown, pluperfect, the head of a fierce horse. Thus, it would be a great or an outstanding race in war and easy to live through the ages. And your book gives you a note saying to translate Fakalem Wiktu as easy, good for sustaining life. Here, Sidonian Dido, was building a huge temple to Juno, rich with gifts and with the divinity of the goddess, for whom the bronze thresholds were rising with steps, and the beams were woven with bronze, and the hinge was hissing with brass doors. In this grove, first, this new thing presented softened his fear, and here first Aeneas dared to hope for safety and to trust better in his afflicted affairs. For he surveys, while he surveys each thing under the huge temple, each thing one by one, the queen, waiting for the queen, and while he marvels at what the fortune may be for the city, and the hands of the artisans, and the labor of the works among them, he sees the Trojan battles in order, and the wars common through the whole world by rumor now. And he sees the sons of Atreus and Priam and Achilles savage to both. He stood and crying said, Achates, what place now, what region in the lands is not full of our labor? Behold Priam. Even here are his rewards for praise. There are tears of things, or of affairs, and mortal things touch the mind. Spare your fear. This fame will bring some safety to you. Thus he said, and he feeds his mind on the empty picture, groaning much or many things, and he wets his face with a large river. For he was seeing how the Greeks warring or fighting around Pergamum were fleeing in this place, and the Trojan youth were pressing, and how in that place the Phrygians were fleeing, and crested Achilles was pressing in his chariot. Not far from here, he recognizes crying the tents of Rhesus with their snow-white canvases, which in first sleep, having been betrayed, the Tydeus was destroying, bloody, with much murder, with much slaughter. And he averts or turns away his burning horses into the camps before they had tasted the pastures of Troy, and had drunk the Xanthus River. In another part, Troilus fleeing with his arms having been lost, the unhappy boy, and having encountered Achilles, an equal of Achilles having encountered, is carried on the horses, and he clings on his back in the empty chariot, holding, however, the reins. The neck and the hairs to this one are dragged through the ground, and the sand is inscribed, or is written, with the spear turned downward, understood. Meanwhile, where are the women? Let's see. Meanwhile, the Eleades, the Trojan women, were going to the temple of hostile Pallas with their hairs loosened, and they were carrying a robe, suppliantly sad and beaten as to their breasts with their palms. The goddess was holding her eyes fixed on the ground, having turned away. The goddess, having averted herself, having turned away, was holding her eyes fixed on the ground. 3 times around the Trojan walls, Achilles had dragged Hector and was selling his lifeless body for gold. Then truly he gives a huge groan from the bottom of his breast as he saw the spoils in the chariot and the body itself of his friend, and the hands, and Priam holding out his hands unarmed. And the person who saw was Aeneas. Aeneas saw the image of this, and he recognized himself mixed with the chief Greeks, and the Oriental battle lines and the arms of Black Memnon. Penthesilea, raging, leads the battle lines of the Amazonians with their crescent-shaped shields, and she burns in the middle of thousands, weaving her golden belts to her exposed breast. A warrior, and the maiden, dares to rush up to men. While these marvelous things are seen to Trojan Aeneas, and while he marvels and fixed, he clings, or he fixes with one stare, with one gaze. The queen, Anchises, approached to the temple, Dido, most beautiful in form, with a great crowd of young men approaching, or Stephante following. Just like Diana leads or exercises her group of dancers on the banks of the Erota or through the cliffs of Cynthus, which 1,000 nymphs, having followed, gather around here and there, or on this part and on that. That one carries a quiver on the shoulder, and walking she towers over all the gods. The joys touch the silent breast of Latona. Such was Dido, and she was carrying herself happy, such through the middle of the crowd, understood, pressing on the work for future kingdoms. Then she sat on the thresholds of the goddess, in the middle of the arch of the temple, covered with arms, and raised up Ty on her throne. She was giving laws or justice and laws, if you will, to the men, and she was equaling the labor in just parts, or was assigning it by lot. When suddenly Aeneas sees Antheus and Sergestus and strong Cloanthus coming up or processing in a great concourse, in a great going, or in a great concourse will work. Whom the black whirlwind, and others of the Trojans, which the black whirlwind had dispelled and deeply had averted to other shores. Or you could say had averted to shores entirely different. He stopped himself at the same time, and Achates at the same time, having been struck with happiness and with fear, stopped. And eager they were burning to join right hands. But the strange or the unknown affair disturbs their minds. They dissemble and they speculate, covered in a hollow cloud. They watch what may be the fortune for the men, and why. Or from what shore, or on what shore they have left their fleet, and why they are coming. For chosen from all the ships, they came begging a favor, and they were seeking the temple with a clamor.